Hello and welcome to Talking Automotive with Mark and John. My name is John Sinclair and my co-host Mark Pellavestra.
Hi John. Today we've got David Wynne from EV 101, and today David gives us an update on recycling EV batteries and the fact that they don't end up in landfill. They actually have a second life and future life as being recycled items. He also talks about the myths around EV fires versus hybrid cars and petrol internal combustion vehicles.
David also gets into good discussion about LCVs and electric LCVs, and also some of the things about the future of LCVs. Some really exciting stuff happening in that space and some really great potential. So a good listen. So let's jump into it.
If you like what you hear, remember to follow us on LinkedIn, on Spotify, on iTunes. Make sure you like us on YouTube, ring the bell, and visit our website at autocurrents.com.
With 30 years' experience in auto logistics and state-of-the-art locations in 5 major Australian cities, Precar Fleet Services is an independent division of Precar Services, offering specialty fleet fit-outs for commercial applications ranging from simple tray and tow bar fitments to fully bespoke service body and accessory installation. With quality-assured safety, compliance and standardisation of vehicle builds, Precar Fleet Services are a premier all-in-one solutions provider for commercial vehicle fleet operators, leasing companies and original equipment manufacturers. For further information on how Precar Fleet Services can assist in solving your commercial vehicle fit-out needs, please visit precar.com.au and click on the link to Fleet Services.
In the business of buying and selling cars? Then make it your business to join FlipperCar, the faster, more efficient car trading platform. Connect to more sellers, find the right inventory faster, and buy trades in seconds. List vehicles in minutes. Instantly connect with potential buyers. Free to sell with no lock-in contracts. Deal with those you've grown to trust or grow your network nationwide and trade in Australia's newest dealer network. Transform your wholesale trading today. FlipperCar, speed and connectivity delivered.
Hi David, thanks for coming on the show again and sharing your wisdom on all things EV. Now I want to start with a question. Most people think of EVs as small little electric passenger cars that zip around in tight little parking spots. But what about commercial vehicles? We know that the medium pickup and cab chassis is the best-selling vehicle. In fact, the two best-selling vehicles in this country are LCVs. And also in the US, LCVs are the best-selling vehicles. So can you tell us about why EVs can be LCVs?
I suppose it comes down to the same thing. They've got wheels, they've got a requirement for driving, they have electric engines, and they have then the batteries. Probably the biggest difference you can say with normal passenger vehicles to LCVs, whether it be light, whether it be heavy vehicles, is the fact that they probably be travelling more kilometres on a daily route. But in saying that, if you look at some of the commercial vehicles where they have a B2B, basically they have a kilometre range that they travel. And if you look at some of the information you have through Australia Post, through the US, again through some of their operations, big trucking operations, most of those travelling points are still less than 150 k's. So they can also then be charged using the technology of the fast chargers in the turnaround. So they're no different in regards to requiring a battery charge. It's basically from that point, how do you plan it out? What is your particular product doing? So whether it be a light commercial vehicle, so it could be the Mercedes-Benz has got an eVito, has been launched over there in Europe since 2018, I think. We're getting it in Australia this year or next year, as well as other products in the range. I see that as a benefit. Again, Australia Post, you look at when they purchase the products from Renault, they have a route to follow. They can calculate that route and see if they have any problems having a distance to travel and the charging requirements. So I think in some cases, commercial vehicles probably make more sense in regards to EV range issues because they can plan out. They know their route day in, day out. Not only that, the charging technology and the ongoing maintenance costs is substantially less than what a normal ICE vehicle would be, whether it be a light commercial, whether it be a heavy commercial vehicle. You talk about the big players, say Mercedes-Benz and Ford. E-Transit's coming out Australia this year as well, I believe. They're all products that will do a kilometre range of around about 200 k's or so before charging is required. You can see that the benefit of that, where if you have a planned route, not a problem at all. But then you look at the things like buses. BYD, another company, Chinese company that we talked about before, is bringing out a bus. The American B bus, I call it, the bus that looks is yellow and black. They travel all throughout the countryside, taking kids to their schools. They've got not only the buses that can do a specific route, but their buses have the ability then to do vehicle to grid charging as well. So, with school buses, they basically have a route, they stay idle, pick up the kids, stay idle, get charged. They're a perfect scenario for electric vehicles, and apparently they've been doing some really good studies on the emissions that a diesel bus that they use gives out, not just from the outside but also the inside, and the amount of cancerous particles that can be consumed within a bus is fairly high. And they're finding out all these things, toxic issues where the diesel is becoming a problem. If they've got a solution like the BYD and other manufacturers that are doing retrofitting as well too, you've got to say that the actual commercial side of it is probably makes more sense than even the passenger range side of it. Now, the biggest problem is they say that obviously you've got to have more batteries create then heavier weight. And so therefore they've got to really look at technologies. And of course the technology in batteries is changing too, as I've mentioned in past commentary, where we looked at lithium phosphate batteries, a lighter battery, less energy dense, but it certainly you can store more in there and provide them with a longer range too as required. And then if you look at Mercedes-Benz, their heavier duties, they've got the ranges. They've got the small range, their medium range, and their long distance, interstate range. Long distance interstate range isn't coming into it at this point in time, but there's certainly the medium and the smaller ranges. So your 10-tonne, 15-tonne trucks are now becoming a normal opportunity for Benz over in Europe to sell the product. Their fast charging systems that they've got, again, B2B, is enhancing the popularity and, of course, the maintenance costs there. So the ability for commercial vehicles to come on board in that area is probably more sensible in regards to cost and also running, because it's a planned operation.
So, Dave, would it be fair to say it's about the last mile? It's not so much the long haul? Yeah,
the long haul trucks are certainly the ones where you won't see EV today. There'll be other solutions for that at this point in time, and perhaps even hydrogen. I think we spoke about that off another conversation early on last week. But certainly for the lighter and medium-sized commercial trucks, I'm not talking about light commercial as in the transit van or the Vito. I'm talking about the 10 to 15 tonne truck. They're the light ones going up to the probably dual axles and so forth. They're certainly happening now, and there'll be more and more. I think Australia Post got Fuso, which comes out of a Benz sort of subsidiary, you could say. They've got 40 commercial vehicles that are EVs now as we speak, Australia Post have. So they know their route. They're more expensive to buy, but they're saying that the costs associated with running is less. So it's a win-win for everybody in regards to that too. And as they become more familiar with what's required, certainly that situation will be far better down the track, again, as battery technology improves.
Now, David, there's been a lot of stories about EV batteries catching on fire and having issues in accidents. Is that true or not?
Look, there's been some interesting articles. Again, I go from around the world trying to collect the information that I can. And certainly there wouldn't be too many weeks you wouldn't see an electric vehicle on fire. It's newsworthy as far as they're concerned. But, from an operational point of view, you've got to say they're very far and few between. It's a study coming out of the US through an insurance company called Auto Insurance EZ. They found they broke the vehicles down by hybrid, petrol and electric. Out of the hybrid cars, they had the most risk of catching fires.
Why would that be, David?
I think it's a mix about both. They've got petrol and also battery. And I think basically you would say that combined there might be an issue. I don't know. They don't go into detail.
Is it a different battery in a hybrid versus an EV?
No, it's a smaller battery. So, I think when it comes down to you look at the way that the configuration is, where the battery location is, where the petrol tanks are, I don't know. But from their survey that they did out of 100,000 cars, 3,400 cars would catch fire out of 100,000 cars, hybrids. So out of a petrol, out of 100,000 cars, 1,500. And out of 100,000 cars, 25 would be electric vehicles.
Now, is that catching fire in an accident?
There'll be accident. But then again, if you look at the recall that in the US they had with the Bolt, the GM Bolt, they actually had a fault with the battery, which they recalled all of them. In fact, they shut down the assembly line for the Bolt, GM did, and stopped production for over 6 months. With that, they then replaced every single battery for every single Bolt that they made, and they're now starting up the production line next month with that particular car. So there are faults, but what people probably get scared about more than anything is the fact that, yes, it's fires. It's a different way of attacking the fire from a EV point of view. So what they've learned, the fire brigades throughout the globe, you can't just pour water on top of the car and hope it goes out. You've got to actually pour water where it's coming from. And if it is a battery that is on fire from an EV, not something else, but it is a battery, you actually have to pour it from underneath and around that battery area. And not only that, once it is extinguished, the possibilities of igniting down the track through another internal short, because it still is power, still is a source of power within each of the cells that may be still active, it can be reactivated too. So they actually have to be separated and put in a different area over a period of time to ensure that if they do ignite again, they don't ignite everything around it. So I think what you've got to look at the study for what they've looked at. And again, electric cars are just new, so it's a new sort of direction we're going on. But fire is a big issue, and I've made the headlines for all the wrong reasons, you can say. They know that if there's an issue, how to control it, but also I think what the study is saying, if you wanted to buy a car that's the safest, you buy an EV, because the rest of them actually have far more active fires within them than what an EV does. So it's a really interesting sort of article, and it goes into a bit of in-depth. And in fact, there's a video that the fire department's put out explaining a lot about it too, which is really interesting to understand and get to see how they're tackling it. And that's going to be something that I'm sure that each country, each state in Australia will take on board, because we all work with different countries in Australia, don't we? We found that out with COVID. They'll take that on board, and I think that'll be part of the emergency response sort of toolkit. We also brought the onus back to, I think, the manufacturer to provide the site departments with a lot more information what they were doing in the first place too. So I think over the next year or two, there'll be so much more data out there and understanding of what to do when a fire does occur, whether it be in an accident. But that's most majority of the time when you see the fires that have been involved in a fairly significant accident. 9 times if it's a Tesla, it could be on autopilot, so it shouldn't be, falling asleep, watching a movie, whatever. And of course, then they hit something at great speeds, and that's when the problems start occurring.
So if a car gets flooded, like we've got a lot of floods happening at the moment, if a car is in an underground car park that gets flooded, it's an EV, does that cause a problem? Can that start a fire?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I've probably looked at that because I've had a friend who's been living up north, very close to Lismore, going through with his EV, going through some water that it basically comes halfway up, you could say, the wheels, so it does cover the door wells, you could say. The way that they're built, especially the batteries, they're fully sealed. So unless there's a manufacturing fault in regards to the way that they're being built, there shouldn't be any problems. The other areas where obviously the connectors, they're all waterproof connectors and they're all rated at a certain level too. I'm led to believe that they're far safer to drive in a water ingressed area. Not that you want to do that because they're not submarines, but they're far safer to drive and less the issue of any shorts or electrocution, you could say. But like everything, you're not supposed to be driving through water. And at the end of the day, you put yourself at risk and everyone else around you if you do.
So if you were to drive through the water and you were to open the door to get out, you're stuck. The car's stopped. Is there a chance of electrocution?
Well, again, with the componentry and the plugs that are powering the high voltage, they wouldn't be allowed to be sold if they were.
David, in terms of recycling, because I know in the automotive market we've always had issues about tyres and the difficulty to recycle tyres. Where are we with recycling batteries and what's happening in that space?
Gosh, that's another good question, John. We go through three different phases. Probably can I start at, let's look at the battery life itself, and then I'll go through the second life, and then I'll go through recycling if I can do it that way, because it probably makes more sense. So the battery life cycle itself, again, initial estimates were in between, say, 5 and 10 years. And if you're talking to a Nissan owner that has an early Model Leaf, that would probably be the case because there's no cooling involved. So batteries require a very good climate around them to maintain their lifespan, you could say. Again, if you look at Tesla being out the longest, a couple of Tesla owners have been putting online through their own blogs 2015, 2016, 2018 model products, S model products. And the battery lifespan of that has gone down by, say, 10% to 12% over a 7 to 8 year period. So they expect the batteries alive that last the life of the car up to 15 years or longer. They expect other components to break down before the batteries do right now. But when the car goes to the grave, you could say, so hopefully the plan is that the batteries will last to the life of the vehicle. It runs out of its own steam. Then it'll go to a second phase or second life, you could say, where batteries, and I'm talking probably of a company over in California in the US, a company called the B2U Storage Systems. They have their own solar farm, and on that solar farm, they've got the casings of a Nissan Leaf. The Nissan Leaf's been selling over there for the last decade plus. So I've got enough batteries over there starting to be obviously required because they've finished the life of the vehicle. Now, they've got containers up to 20 of these batteries in the cradle that they come with from the car, stacked throughout their solar farm. So those batteries are being used then as a second life to generate power off their solar into the grid at peak times. The owner is stating that out of that cost associated with it, it's something like $25 per megawatt he costs him to do. And he charges out something like $200 that is, megawatts during peak time. So it's a very profitable period for him. And those batteries so far have lasted 3 years of this trial period, so and continuing going. So that's a sort of a second life, and there's other second life companies coming on board. I'll go through in more detail, but probably more importantly, the question you asked about recycling. Another question that gets asked regularly, and I hear it again, probably listen too much on the radio, is that when you finish with the batteries, they go into landfill. That's the furthest from the truth. There's a number of companies, Redwood, Northvolt, to name a couple, but they are starting up all over recycling. And recycling the batteries now has become a business where you can basically bring the battery into its recycling factory. It'll start the process by using the power in the battery already to charge the first phase. The first phase being the grinding, you could say. So the first phase is being charged by batteries coming in. They're being charged, putting the batteries into the crusher, and then the crusher goes through the system and so forth. It goes right through all the processes where they purify to the point where the materials coming out of the batteries now are as pure as what they're coming out of the mining. So there will be a point at one stage where there'll be a turnover where mining may become a thing in the past, depending on what the growth will be, and that probably another 50 years or so, where you'll just be recycling these batteries again and again and again, with the integrity of the minerals that they're using being so pure as coming out of the earth as they started to be brand new. So the misconception is the fact that we won't be utilising it to be a throwaway society. Not only the batteries, but just about every component that you talk about on the car now is being recycled too. And batteries is one of them. But batteries is a really good business. It's a business that's going to go through the roof over the next, say, decade plus, when these batteries then come through from the second life into the recycling to get manufactured into new batteries for new cars again. So it's really exciting times there. So two companies to look for. Redwood is now is been started up by a person coming out of Tesla, and starting his own business. And the other one, Northvolt, is a Swedish company or a Scandinavian company doing the same thing. And in fact, the Scandinavian company's already built their first recycled battery or new battery out of recycled batteries already. And Redwood's saying that they can make a profit other than a startup cost associated. They can make a profit from doing it already. So as technology is improving in that area, you've got to say it's going to be a win-win for everybody. So less mining down the track once it gets up to a number that can be basically in turnaround. So you've got a 360 value chain coming from the batteries themselves. So they're great sort of opportunities moving forward, not only for the environment, but also for business too.
It's interesting you say that because we often get sold the idea that cars are disposable. We've all seen the footage of various documentaries going back to the 70s and 80s where cars would be getting pushed off into rivers and seabeds, etc. All the old American cars just getting dumped. Whereas that's no longer. It's all about recycling the car. The metal in the car gets recycled. Even in the ICE vehicles, the catalytic converters get recycled. So the battery, it makes sense. Why? It's almost like we've been sold a furphy that everything else in the car can be recycled except the battery. And yet batteries on ICE vehicles have been recycled for as long as I can remember. The old lead acid batteries got recycled. You just cut the casing off and they would get the lead out, they'd put new acid in it, and all the metals were preserved and reused. And in fact, often those batteries were very good batteries because the people reconditioning them were very skilled operatives that made those batteries exceptionally good for second life. So it makes sense that the rare earth metals that are in these batteries now, EV batteries, which are a different battery to a lead acid battery, that they're being recycled as the battery gets dismantled. You draw out the elements and then you repurpose them or have a second life to those elements as they go into the next generation of batteries. So really, there's always some waste along the way, but really that waste is quite minimal because I dare say the casings will be getting recycled as well. Like a lot of people don't realise, and we will actually have a podcast on this with another speaker, around the recyclability of plastic bumpers and how much of that gets recycled. What happens from a tyre perspective and the retreading and recycling and using it for road surfaces. The metal, the car crushers that squash these cars once everything's removed off them and sends them off to a faraway land where it turns back into another car. There is this 360 that occurs. So you've got this significant energy storage device, being the battery, that it makes sense that there are ways to commercialise the repurposing of that. And as you say, the repurposing is repays a lot quicker from a return on investment than a lot of other activities in the industrial area.
When you consider the battery costs associated with making the vehicle is probably one of the highest portions of the vehicle itself, it's a good business model to be in.
Oh, indeed.
But for me, I suppose if you look in Australia is huge is Australia. So that's an opportunity. I don't think a lot of people think it's coming, but not yet, but it will be.
The big question that people will ask, we talked about the B2B LCVs. Now, with B2B LCVs, there's the planned route, there's the back to base, so there's that charging infrastructure. When we look at the other LCVs that are being purchased, and for those that don't know what LCV is, it's a ute, it's a Hilux, it's a Ranger, it's that type of vehicle. So can you fit a lift kit to an EV? Because that's what all the go with these guys are. They're not lowering, they're lifting them. So lift kits, does it compromise the EV? Yes or no?
Yeah, they won't compromise. But again, probably if you look at some of the high end, Rivian is a startup company, and the suspension on that actually is a air suspension scenario, so it will go up and down anyway. And the Hummer is almost exactly the same, and the Cybertruck is very similar too. But you've got then the likes of the F-150. So I can just go through, I suppose, the side of it where modifications is one thing. Suspension is certainly an element that tradies will probably not worry about the four-wheel drivers going off the road. Will certainly do it. These vehicles will be more than capable of doing things that the normal four-wheel drives of today have no chance. So if you look at the two that they'll give you sort of chills up your spine, you can say in the future, that will come to Australia. That being everyone talks about when Tesla Cybertruck will come to Australia, and the Rivian. Rivian's actually accessories are being sourced out of ARB in Australia, and I've been over here doing some testing. Those particular vehicles are just amazing vehicles. So they've got power. So I'm talking about Rivian in general, 560 kilowatts of power, 1,120 kilowatts of torque. Amazing stats when you go four-wheel driving, and also a four-wheel drive system that's based off four engines driving independently off each wheel. You look at the what they call F-150 Lightning, the Ford vehicle. A standard F-150, you could say, for tradespeople, but it has 3-pin power plugs in the back for tradies to use their own gear as required, or charge up their rechargeable batteries for their power batteries on site. It has an incredible 370k range, they say, 420 kilowatts of power, over 1,000 newton meters of torque, and a payload of I think it said with brakes of 4.5 tonne. These kind of vehicles, so the Lightning. Then you've got the Hummer. The Hummer is an amazing piece of equipment. You remember the Hummers in the old days, obviously, the old army trucks, you could say, and then obviously trying to convert them into a vehicle that I won't repeat on the show, but obviously being used for different things. The EV Hummer, 745 kilowatts, capable of doing 100 Ks in 3 seconds. These cars are actually being launched in the States this year, in fact, the first 6 months. And because electric vehicles don't have the same restrictions as what ICE vehicles meaning that they don't have emission problems, so they don't fall under any emission codes, they can easily be changed from left to right. And just think about this for a sec. You've got engines that can allow steering configurations to be easily fitted to the product, other than, say, ICE vehicles where they had a master cylinder in place, or a different component, the air conditioning compressor or whatever. They don't have those restrictions. And then you go one step further, you have steer-by-wire, which is coming out as well. Then the configuration side for coming left-hand, right-hand drive comes out of the equation. And these things, if the country wants them, will certainly be able to get into a country like Australia quite easily. But the F-150 will be coming, not this year for Australia, but certainly. Then you've got the Chinese LDV, the Great Wall. They're coming out with an electric vehicle with a 120 kilowatt system. Again, just for a ute, a dual cab ute. It's already in the market in New Zealand. It's right-hand drive. So those vehicles will be coming out. Unbelievable stats for a country that loves these kind of products. You've got to say it's going to be interesting times in the next 2 to 3 years, not just in passion, not in commercial, but also in Australians' love with utes.
And this is the beauty of why there's going to be an accelerated, pardon the pun again, take-up of EVs, because, and I've had many conversation with people about this. You and I have been playing with EVs for quite a few years. The early EVs, that the mindset was, they had to be, small little hatches that had no room for people and didn't drive very far. So really they weren't attractive to what we use as consumers and commuters. But as you say, the best-selling cars are light commercial vehicles in this country and in pretty much the Western world. Other than Europe. Europe still likes smaller cars, but SUVs and light commercials. Light commercials fit lifestyle. And if you've got a light commercial that can suddenly perform to those statistics that you just outlined from an acceleration perspective, that's incredible. But even from an off-road capability, the weaknesses we talk about with light commercials and four-wheel drives is the diff problem, and you need diff locks and limited slip diffs to get traction, because as soon as you lose traction on this wheel, that wheel is going to get no drive, because all the drive's going to go to the wheel that doesn't have traction, unless you have 3 diff locks and you have all these complicated four-wheel driving systems that consume energy and consume fuel by driving through various devices that try to retain things and stop them from slipping. So now you've got 4 electric motors at each wheel that just look after that wheel. So if it doesn't get traction, that motor just shuts down. The other motor doesn't lose power because the other one's spinning. It just keeps doing what it does, or it drives, more energy can go to those wheels with traction. And this is where the systems are enable you to get better performance. So really, if you're a four-wheel drive enthusiast, you actually want to get an EV. It's going to be quiet, it's going to be better for the environment that you're driving over, and you're going to have more fun. And it's going to cost you less in the long run because oil prices we know aren't going to come down anytime soon with the issues from a global perspective. So, and if you've got your solar panel with you when you're camping, you can charge up your four-wheel drive and you've got no range issues.
Well, that's a lot of solar panels, but that's okay.
But there you go.
I was watching the news today. They're printing these solar panels now, and they're doing a test. They're going to drive across Australia, where they're just going to tape the printed panels to the roof.
Yeah, even cars now that are starting at Fisher is a company who's actually got solar panels on their roof. But what that will do is that will power the utility things of the car rather than powering the battery. But yeah, I mean, technology is going to change a lot. And these cars, these big ones, the Rivians, let's talk the Cybertruck and also the Hummer, we're talking some really big EV batteries in these things. So range certainly won't be an issue unless you go deep into the woods. And of course, then there's no battery charger there to charge up for sure. But by and large, most of the four-wheel driving areas that can be covered certainly will be looked after. But it will be a growth thing. But these things aren't just for going off road, but they're also for carrying tradesman tools as well too. So we're, as I keep on saying, we're at the S curve. We're right at the bottom, and the next decade, the growth is going to be substantial. All the stuff is on the website, the vehicles and so forth, the information in regards to how we're tracking in regards to our performance from a sales point of view, but also from a what's out there in the market. All that information is there, and it's only going to get better and better. And of course, then the costs of running the car compared to an ICE vehicle, which is for a later date, the bi-directional charging, they'll come on board where you can charge your house or charge your grid or charge anything load. They're all exciting things, and people haven't even thought about that yet.
Yeah, David, thanks very much. I think for sharing your information and what you're doing with EV 101. It's really fascinating, and I think what you highlighted especially is some of the exciting things going to happen in the future. So we're really looking forward to it. So thanks for coming on the show.
Pleasure. Look forward to doing another one soon.
Thanks, David. Thanks for listening. Hopefully you got as much out of the conversation with David as we did about the state of play in the EV world, what's coming, what is happening, and some of the myths that get busted.
If you enjoyed what you heard, subscribe to our channel on YouTube by hitting the bell below. Also follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can visit our website, watercurrents.com, and we're also available on iTunes and Spotify. Thanks for listening.